Hey guys, my name is Aaron and thank you for joining me today again at the French River Homestead. Super pumped you guys could be here today. We're going to continue on with our kitchen cabinet build, and today we're going to start at the countertop. Now I've got 2.5 inch pieces of silver maple that are about 18 inches wide each, so overall width of 36 inches, and I think the overall length is about 6.5 feet. So we need it to be just about 25 inches wide and 6 feet long. So we're going to attempt to flatten these by hand and book match them for the countertop. Then cut out the opening for the sink and do the finish work, install it, probably do some butterflies, and have a working, functioning kitchen cabinet with a sink, which we're happy about. I'm going to leave a link to the entire cabinet series playlist in the cards, so you can see how we did the carcass and everything else. Otherwise, let's get started. So the first thing I had to work on here was getting the slab size to its approximate dimensions. I wanted to join the two pieces together to make one slab right away, just so that way I didn't have excess material to flatten. So I think it was about 36 inches wide with the two slabs all together, and I needed 25 inches. And since I wanted to attempt to book match these two slabs, I wanted to have that book matching as near to center as I could. So I ended up having to remove a little bit from both sides of either slab. I think you can see here is about 4 inches from the inside of both pieces, and then just a little bit on the outside. You'll see that I've got 2 lines on each slab, and that's just because originally I was planning on using my circular saw with a straight edge, and the blade is offset 1.5 inches from where the actual blade is, or from the straight edge, so the difference being 1.5 inches. Well, it turns out I didn't have a straight edge that was long enough to do this, so I had to freehand it anyways. So really only needed the one line here, but I'm just giving myself some references for the end cuts for the overall length. This is fluid, and it'll probably change as I go through and make my cuts, but I just wanted to make sure that I had enough length, and then figure out there's a few things I wanted to use these offcuts for. So I just wanted to make sure that I left enough room without cutting it too short. So I wanted to have reference marks put in there right away, just so that way I didn't cut it too short. Now I'm cutting these slabs with my circular saw, and like I said, I'm going to do it freehand here, so I'm just going nice and slow. It's not going to be perfect. I'm certainly not capable of cutting a perfectly straight line freehand, but the good news is that I'm able to joint the edges later on, so I know that it doesn't have to be perfect, but the closer I can get it now, the less work I have to do later on down the road. So I'm just going nice and slow here, trying to be as straight as I can, and hopefully it'll save me some work later on. So now that everything is cut, at least the inside part of the slabs are cut, I want to joint these so that way I can make these two slabs into one big slab. That way I can get my overall width for the slab that I need for the countertop. So I want to make sure to clean up and joint these two edges. Now normally I would stick these two slabs together and or edge joint them at the same time, because then any discrepancies would be counteracted by the other one. So if I'm actually jointing these with a 5-degree bevel, for instance, I could just flip it over and then it would be the mirror opposite and they would still line up nicely. Since we are trying to book match these, that wouldn't work because it would be the opposite side, and it just wasn't going to work for this instance, but that's what I would normally do. So this just took a little bit more work because I had to do each one individually. But overall, it goes pretty quick. You just mark out the high spots, hit it with your joiner plane, or in this case, I'm using my jack plane, but either one works fine. Just take your time, smooth it out nice, and it'll get a real good fit. So I had said in the beginning, or in the introduction of this video, that I wanted to flatten the slab by hand. My goal was just to use my hand planes and flatten it out, but I ran into some trouble. I ran into some trouble. I don't have a scrub plane, and you'll notice that in certain parts of this video, you'll see that the edges of the slabs are twisted. There was a pretty significant twist in the offsetting corners, and in order to glue these two slabs together, there ended up being a little bit of a ridge in some parts, and there was quite a considerable amount of material that I had to remove to flatten these two. And just due to the fact of timing, we're starting to get snow up here and it's getting cold out, and I just didn't want to be messing around. So I actually went and bought a router just to flatten this for this project. I had sold my router a few years back, and now I ended up having to go buy a new one just to do this project. So I just built a small, simple router sled that I was able to use with this straight bit to flatten this huge slab. At this point, it's still in its 36-inch width, and I think it's just over 6.5 feet long. Because of that twist, I ended up having to reduce the thickness of the slab by quite a bit. It started out at just over 1.5 inches, and I think the end thickness, at least in some parts where that twist it was about 3/4 of an inch thick. So I've got a little bit extra work now to compensate for that, which you'll see in a few minutes. Now, once I've got the slab flattened, I brought it inside just because it was starting to snow out, and I wanted to fill all the voids with some epoxy. And there's also some punky parts that are a little bit softer, so I was going to try some wood hardener on those. So here you can see that I'm just putting some tape on the backside just to make sure that my epoxy and whatnot does not run through. I got some slow setting epoxy. I used the West system, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out. It was the first time I'd always steered clear of the West system just because to me it seemed like it was too expensive for what you're trying to do, but it worked awesome in this instance, and I'm happy that I picked it up. But here it's important to tape the underside of the voids just so that way your epoxy doesn't run straight through and end up on your floor. And now I'll be mixing up the West System epoxy. I did not go for any tints in here. One of the major voids here is a big bark inclusion, and it's already dark, and I kind of wanted it to be clear so that way you could see the bark inclusion. I was worried that if I had tinted this epoxy, it would just look like a black void. So I just went with the clear tint, which is why I got the 207 hardener, just so that way it was I think it's the 207 hardener. Whichever one is the clear. There's the 206, 207, I think, are the two. They're the slow setting hardeners, and I got the one that's clear, just because I didn't want any coloration. I just wanted it to be nice and clean. The propane torch is useful. It helps to pop the bubbles as they set. I didn't want to vibrate this, or I don't know. The projects that I've used epoxy in the past have been small enough that I can tap the bubbles out. This slab, I didn't want to really be moving around or tapping around or vibrating or doing much to it, so the torch worked really well to cause the bubbles to come to the surface, and then it popped them. So just be careful that you're doing a real light pass and you're not actually igniting anything. For finish then, I chose to do a simple linseed oil finish just to bring out the grain. The sawmill that I got the maple slab from, he really recommended that I do a linseed oil finish prior to doing any sort of a varnish, polyurethane. It really brings out the grain, and I'm happy that I listened to him because it looks pretty cool. So just a simple linseed oil finish, and then I just wiped on some varnish on top of that, a couple coats of that with a rub down of steel wool in between. And you'll notice here also that I did inset a couple of butterflies. I didn't shoot any video of that because I just, at some point I'll do a specific video for butterflies, but for right now it was just kind of a feature of the countertop and not really anything that affected its performance. So I'll get that video out here as soon as I do another one, but I just wanted to point that out. Now, I had mentioned that the problems that I ran into by flattening the slab, I lost quite a bit of thickness on it, and I was worried about that glue joint between the two slabs. If there was a lot of weight on there, maybe it wouldn't support it, and that glue joint would come apart. So that plus, it would have looked kind of silly having such a thin countertop. So what I decided to do was on the carcass on the top of the carcass, I put a 3/4 inch thick piece of plywood, and that's going to be just an underlayment to support the countertop. Then with the 3/4 inch thickness of the countertop, it brings the total depth or thickness up to 1.5 inches, which it would have been to begin with. But to cover up that plywood, then I had to make an apron to go around the countertop. So I'm using some of the offcuts I had from cutting the actual countertop out of the slab. That way at least it'll match the same species, and the grain pattern is pretty similar. So I'm just flattening the top, and then pretty much the same thing here for finish wise, but I wanted to embellish it a little bit and include a dovetail where the two sides of the apron would meet. I thought that would look better than just a mitered. So just cutting a dovetail here, and then to attach the apron to the countertop, I drilled some pilot holes, and I actually screwed it to the countertop. On the sides where the end grain was, I left slotted holes or slotted pilot holes, so that way when I screwed it to there, it still allowed for wood movement. I didn't fill those in yet because I wanted to make sure that the slotted holes provided enough wood movement. In the front, I drilled some plugs that would just fit in over on top of those screws to cover them up, and then I finished the apron the same way that I finished the countertop. Alright guys, so that's going to wrap up this video. I'm super pumped to be done with our kitchen cabinet and the countertop and to have a sink again. It is awesome. Truly, washing dishes is a luxury that we take for granted sometimes. So thanks for watching this series that I put together, and if you have any questions or comments on this video or anything else on our homestead, please leave me a note in the comments section below. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing and don't forget to hit that like button. Until next time, thanks for watching.